Hola, David.
Hola.
It is so good to have you here on this chilly October day. We got our first snow, was it yesterday?
No.
2 days ago?
Yes.
So
Friday.
tell me what happened for you when that started happening.
It snowed. I was on the phone with someone from the congregation. We were having a conversation about religious education, and I said, "Hold on, it's snowing. I might have to put you on hold because I might go outside and dance."
Yeah, so if you follow David on Facebook, you will quickly learn during the winter months that he loves, loves, loves snow, which is a mystery to me and many of us although it was a pretty Hollywood snow on Friday morning. um, Generally speaking, there are a few of us who are dreading that a little bit, especially this winter. So I'm glad to see your joy around it. And you just keep dancing. That's great. Someday you'll be able to shovel too, I imagine. Not far from now. So that we've been doing this. This is our second month. I know you watched Steve Davidson's talk about Jephthah's daughter last month. And for those of you who are new to what we're doing, you can find that on our YouTube channel. But we are doing this out of acknowledgement that each person, and knowing that each person reads the Bible from a particular lens related to who they are and how they were raised and what kinds of things have happened in their life. And we've also been handed a way of reading the Bible and different ways of interpreting the Bible from theologians down through the years, often without us even being made aware that what we know is an interpretation. And most of those voices have been white men, as I said before. And when others have approached the text and done good work studying it, they sometimes find new insights and understandings that are more helpful to our time and place, or at least expand our ideas about who God is and how God is to everyone or to a particular group of people. So I'm super happy to have you here with us today at Spirit Garage to offer your lens and perspective. I'm hoping that you'll tell us a story that resonates with you, sticks with you, helps you think about how God is moving in the world and how God is related to you in the world. So I'm just going to take myself off screen and let you have the time, and I'll come back and join you when we're done, okay?
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you. And good morning, everyone. Very, very good morning to you all. Thank you, wherever it is that you find yourself, for allowing me into your sacred space with you. It's truly, truly an honor and a joy for me to be in your presence this morning. So thank you. Again, I come from various traditions and a culture that is mixed and a culture that is coming alive. And it's important for me to speak of theology, to speak of the things of the divine in a way that is embodied. So, not to just speak and share ideas, but to embody them, to invite others and myself to see ourselves into the story that God is writing, into the divine's narrative that exists and is being created. I come with you with a testimony. It is important in many traditions, but I invite you into a testimony of sorts, my testimony that I'm bringing to you and sharing with you. So as I begin, I invite you then to listen. Listen, dear siblings of the faith, to the words that are found in the first chapter of the book of Genesis. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. It was late September of my senior year in high school, and I was driving my blue beat-up Ford Taurus after having submitted an application to my dream school, Indiana University, IU Bloomington. My mind was racing with the possibilities that only a 17-year-old can feel. Yet, at the back of my mind, I had to keep telling myself, David, calm down. It could all fall apart. You know this. Don't get your hopes up. And almost as if to prove my point, my old car lurched to remind me that I had to turn away from the road that was going to become a rural highway soon. You see, my old car couldn't go above 50 miles per hour, so my choices were turn left onto a church parking lot or turn right into a cemetery. Now I can still picture that late evening sun hitting the fields that were ready for harvest as I turned left into the parking lot of St. Paul's Lutheran Church. Now, for some reason, I parked and the lights were on. And for some reason, I got out of my car and walked through those doors. As if on cue, a man with a collar, tall and lanky, greeted me with a surprised, yet very friendly and welcoming, "Hello." But what does one even say in those situations? Listen again, dear siblings of the faith, to the words found in the first chapter of Genesis. En el principio creó Dios los cielos y la tierra estaba desordenada y vacía, y las tinieblas estaban sobre la faz del abismo, y el Espíritu de Dios se movía sobre la faz de las aguas. In the Hebrew, we hear words tohu vabohu, and this is translated into English as formless and void, and into Spanish as desorden y vacío. These words could also be translated into English as chaos and confusion. The fall of 2010 and spring of 2011 was busy for me. I was accepted into IU Bloomington, on track for a BA in linguistics and public policy. I had fallen in love with the people of St. Paul's Lutheran after that very strange night of me having walked through their doors. I was going through their catechetical process, and I would affirm my baptism on Easter Vigil among them, and I would graduate in the top 20 of my 300 plus class, and life was sweet. On May 10th, 2011, the Indiana legislature signed House Bill 1402, which prohibited non-US citizens with various levels of immigrant documentation or lack thereof from receiving in-state tuition at public universities, public institutions of higher education in the Hoosier State. So overnight, I lost all of my scholarships, and my financial aid from IU was no more, on top of now being asked to pay out-of-state tuition. So I contacted my school counselor, Miss White, who looked me in the face and said to me at that age and in that situation, something that was devastating. David, maybe college isn't for you, or at least maybe not a public university, or at least not a university. Now, again, I was 17 years old with different dreams at that time. And since then, I've come to appreciate all manners of paths and journeys. And I advocate now for different choices following compulsory education. But again, at that time and in that moment, for my dreams, at that moment, my world fell apart. I entered a world of formless and void, tohu vabohu, chaos and confusion. So listen again, dear siblings of the faith, to the words found in the first chapter of Genesis. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim ve'et haaretz, ve'haaretz hayet tohu vavohu, ve'choshech al pnei tehom, ve'ruach Elohim merachefeth al pnei hamayim. Now back up just a bit. You see, I had fallen in love with the good people of St. Paul's Lutheran, as I shared with you. And I'd done it so quickly and had thrown myself so deeply among them that I had not fully understood what I was doing. And as my world fell apart, my dreams were blown away, I grasped for groundedness and I couldn't find it. You see, part of my story includes that I'd been raised between a fundamentalist Christian household and a traditional Roman Catholic one. I had never fully bought into the particular theology of the one fundamentalist congregation in which I had spent a majority of my formative adolescent years, and which demanded I be saved, sanctified, and live in holiness unto the Lord. And as I wonder about it, it might have begun summers prior to this time of chaos and confusion I've told you about up to this. You see, having always been interested in languages, I'd spent lots of time buried in the public library section on linguistics. I'd worked my way through several books when I came upon an old work. It had that musty old book smell, and it felt like it was going to fall apart at any moment. But as I read through it, I came to find out that Hebrew was a gendered language, is a gendered language. So if one were to look at the nouns, the adjectives, the verbs, the adverbs, etc., in the first chapter of Genesis, for example, one would find that the Spirit of God or the wind of God, the breath, Haruach Elohim, that was hovering over the face of the water, was doing it in a feminine way. The Spirit, the wind, the breath, it's a feminine noun. It's a feminine word, and anything that she does is done in a feminine way. Veruach Elohim merachefet. And the womanly creating spirit of God hovered in a feminine creating way that gives birth over the chaos and confusion. Now, that year's summer, as I lay on the bottom bunk of a fundamentalist Christian summer camp, I shared this tidbit when late night conversation had turned to God. The cabin leader, a much older man who is a preacher in that movement, quickly shut it down. God is most certainly male, and he is glorified in the King James translation, good night. Well, that had settled it. I would never find a home among my literal siblings of the faith, which would a few years later open me up to the people at St. Paul's, but which would leave me without a groundedness in any community as I was grasping for hope among people that I was barely getting to know and people I had left in the midst of my own world falling into chaos and confusion. So listen again, dear siblings, to the words found in the first chapter of Genesis. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. I'm jumping forward a few years, and I found myself back in Minnesota's Twin Cities on Luther Seminary's campus in the fall of 2019. My broken down black Mitsubishi Galant had barely gotten me back to campus, and I was returning from an internship for my last year of classes, and I was full of hope. As I walked beneath some shady oaks in front of the main building, I sighed as I took stock. It had taken a village to get me to and through Valparaiso University for my undergraduate studies. My home congregation had rallied for me and made my dreams of a university education come true. I had started classes at Valpo in August 2011 and had graduated in May of 2015, all within my then life plan, the one that was going to work out perfectly. And now it was taking a village to get me through my seminary graduate studies at Luther. I was ever thankful and hopeful, but cautious. Now, as I imagined finishing up my last 4 credits in the span of one whole academic year, nice and slow, my mind was racing with the possibilities. Yet at the back of my mind, I had to keep telling myself, David, calm down. It could all fall apart. You know this. Don't get your hopes up. And it was on the evening of Friday, the 13th of March, 2020, that I found myself alone on public transit bus number 14. I was leaving a synagogue's Erev Shabbat service and was heading back home. As an aside, through my ups and downs of journeying through Christianity, the synagogue has always been a concept, but that's another story for another time. Friday, the 13th of March, 2020. Talk about formless and void. Tohu vabohu, chaos and confusion. I'm sure that each one of you has your own story of when life completely changed for you this past spring. When everything around us, life as we knew it, ground to a screeching halt. And all of a sudden, in caring for the neighbor, we began to isolate ourselves from what we had created as our daily lives. So, what then? What were we to do? Who were we? What about our dreams? What about my graduation and the life that was supposed to start afterward? Listen, dear siblings of the faith, to the words found in the first chapter of Genesis. En el principio creó Dios los cielos y la tierra estaba desordenada y vacía, y las tinieblas estaban sobre la faz del abismo, y el Espíritu de Dios se movía sobre la faz de las aguas. Today, we find ourselves in the midst of a worldwide pandemic and in the midst of social unrest stemming from centuries-long murders and continued murdering of Black bodies in this country. And in this liminal space of polarization, of fear, of impending future events, of injustice, continued injustice against our Black siblings, I invite us to consider that we are in a time of chaos and confusion. And well, duh. But dearest siblings of the faith, in this tohu vavohu that we find ourselves, let us also be sure that there is most certainly a wind from God, the Spirit of God sweeping over the face of our own turbid waters. That the mothering God is creating, that the divine is nurturing, that we are being held in tenderness even while we cannot see or even dream of tomorrow. That we are being created as we live into chaos and confusion. God is breathing. God's Spirit is dancing in the midst of all of the formless void around us. The tohu vavohu, the chaos and confusion of our lives, God is with us. Now, my life has been chaotic, and I may have lost you in going back and forth with all of the stories that have shaped me. But I hope that you hear a testimony that attests to the fact that God is creating. Now, I do often ball up my fists against the divine, shouting into a seeming void, "What the hell are you doing? What is to become of me? Are you even there?" Now, I have not yet received any answers, so I don't have any answers for you this morning. Or perhaps I've received many answers. And perhaps we are all a part of this chaotic and confusing story that is being created. The empire would have us believe that we can only read and think about stories that tell us of liberation. The empire would have us believe that we can only look at these old stories and think of them as nice tales of what our forefathers and foremothers believed about the world being created. But I'm here to invite you and to think of your own life as a testimony to this narrative of the divine. That the divine is dancing in your lives and in our lives and is creating, and that there is chaos and confusion. But that as people of faith, or as people of hope, we are called to trust that the breath of God, the Spirit of God, the wind of God is blowing into our midst and is holding us. So listen, dear siblings of the faith, to the words found in the first chapter of the book of Genesis. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. God is with you. God is with us. The mothering God is creating. The mothering God is dancing into our chaos and confusion. And we are invited to speak testimonies of hope, to speak testimonies of the pain that we have endured and of the light that we cannot yet see, but for which we will hope will arrive in the morning. Amen.
Abby, you never disappoint. I thank you for inviting us into a piece of your story and for inviting us to see where our story intertwines with that and intertwines with God. It was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I have a few fun questions for you to close out our time together, and some fun and some might just help us figure out our next book. So, what book, fiction or nonfiction, has captured your attention lately, or what book do you wish all white people would read?
Great. As I consider this question, I'm kind of twofold. So I have, especially after the summer that was very busy for me, tried to get back to reading as a way of re-energizing myself, as a way of re-engaging parts of me that I hadn't engaged with in a while. So what I've been reading has been for pleasure. What I've been reading has been fun for me. I do commend to you all the book I'm Still Here by Austin Channing Brown, and that is making the rounds again, and it's something I commend to you all. I have been reading, however, going back to favorites of my own, I've been reading Letters to a Young Poet by Rilke, and have been just going over it and over it and over it and finding it just as enriching as it was when I first encountered it, with full of confusion my last year of undergrad, wondering about where am I supposed to be headed. So this is the book that I've been rereading and engaging with.
Fantastic. That's the one where you'll find those lines. And the point is to live everything, live the questions now while you have them. And someday you'll live into the answers, something like that. That's a
Yes.
great suggestion. Thank you. And yeah, Debbie, write down I'm Still Here. We should definitely put that back on our voting list. Okay, I'm excited for this one. What song always makes you dance?
There are so many songs that always make me dance. I love to dance. Dancing is so fun for me, and dancing all sorts of things. But I've been listening a lot to just classics of salsa, merengue, those Latin Caribbean rhythms and beats. So I've been listening to quite a few, also cumbia from Colombia, and I have really enjoyed listening to and dancing to La Pollera Colorada, which is I could type out the name of it for you if that's helpful, but it's a cumbia song from the Caribbean area of Colombia.
Cool. Thanks. And do you have a favorite podcast?
I don't listen to podcasts, so no.
Okay. And if heaven exists in a way that means that someone will speak to you, and God has a voice, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive?
That's tough because the divine is so imbued into everything that
Mm.
I don't imagine if there is a heaven that the divine would be there to greet me in any sort of physical way.
Right.
Like, welcome, here's your like room key. So I'd say, if anything, I'd sort of hope that if there is a heaven and the divine is there, that I would simply fall into ultimate love,
Mm.
that I would know I am in ultimate love. So that would be the greeting that I would prefer. It's not a greeting per se, but rather a reality of falling into ultimate love.
Lovely. I have a question from the chat section in here too that asks what draws you to languages. Do you know?
I'm not sure. I think partly because of having immigrated to the US and having found the so I loved Spanish. I learned to read quickly alongside my grandmother, who taught me to read out of the Psalms.
Mm.
And I loved reading, and books opened up the world to me. So I loved languages, starting with Spanish, moved to the US, and found that what I had known as my world could not be translated. So I had to translate it myself into English. And so I learned English fairly quickly, and I began to practice it a lot and speak it, and that opened up a new world to me. So I think the opening up of worlds,
Mm.
depending on the language and the different nuances of those worlds, was really intriguing to me.
Mhm.
So then from that, I just started to be interested in languages and the worlds that they open up to us.
Yeah, that's great. And do you have a poem or a quote that you want to close us out with for this time of our worship?
I do, and you kind of stole it. I was going to stop you while you were sharing from Rilke, because it's such a great quote. But I'll share that quote
Good.
from Rilke,
Yeah.
and I'm so happy that you know it. But just as a reminder, from the gift that are his works. You are so young. You have not even begun, and I would like to beg you, dear sir, as well as I can, to have patience with everything that is unsolved in your heart, and to try to cherish the questions themselves, like closed rooms and like books written in a very strange tongue. Do not search now for the answers which cannot be given you, because you could not live them. It is a matter of living everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, one distant day, live right into the answer.
Lovely. Thank you.